Hi everybody, this is the Be a Real Gamer PC Builders Guide. We did a Steam Box Builders Guide on the site a few months ago, but this is more for an actual gaming build. We're going to try to hit a couple of price points here for your builds, and they are 600, 800, and roughly 1200, Donnie?
Yeah.
Okay, we're here with Donnie, as always, and a buddy of ours, Nikki.
Yeah,
Hello.
he's gonna add absolutely nothing to this conversation, but
I'll be asking questions.
he looks good while he's doing it, so you know.
Oh yeah.
To
And that's Donnie's mom in the background.
It was completely silent for 45 minutes until you started rolling.
Right? Exactly. That's this. We're just gonna keep rolling because hey, fuck it. This is showbiz. Not really.
Absolutely. All of this is gonna get edited out. Nikki won't even be here by the time this
Or I'm just gonna be really lazy and do my.
Pixelated.
Or I'm going to be really lazy and do my editing job, which is nothing. That's the most likely scenario.
That's usually what happens. I don't know why I don't start recording these things and editing them.
So basically, you have 600, which is enough to get your foot in the door as a gamer. Now there are the new consoles that just came out, which are
Coming out. They're
coming out. I'm sorry.
Yeah, which are between $400 and $500,
Yep.
depending on which camp you play for.
Yep. And basically, we're going to be giving you the system builds at 600, 800, and 1200. And for 600, you can build a pretty decent gaming PC. And yeah, so could you stop that, please?
I could, but why should I?
Okay, we need to be more serious here. At least I'm going to try to be more serious.
Alex
No.
doesn't like being entertaining.
No. No, serious.
Okay, I can't find the $600 build. You know what, Donnie? Why don't you go over the $600 build? Because I just can't
I
find
will
it.
absolutely go over the $600 build, you unprofessional fuck.
And
I have the
now-
800. I have the $800 build twice here for some reason because I can't read.
Yeah, so, and we're going to throw these up in the video while you're watching so you can see them on the screen, but, and there'll be some links to the actual parts list, but for the CPU in the $600 build, it's an FX 6300, that's an AMD FX 6300, that's a 6-core processor at 3.5 gigahertz. Realistically, at that price point, it's about $120. There really isn't a better CPU for the money, and there definitely isn't anything that's worth spending less on. Because you might spend like $20 less, but you're going to get like a quad core. So I would spend the extra money and definitely get the full-on 6-core CPU.
Especially because I mean, I think we should bring up the reason why 6 cores are going to be necessary.
Well, I'll get into that in a minute after I finish listing this stuff.
Okay.
For the motherboard, it's a Gigabyte GA970A-DS3P.
It's the link
a
is going to
long
be in
time.
the description. They're complicated.
970 boards have no onboard graphics.
Okay.
And they usually have Crossfire. I believe this board can do some form of Crossfire. Let's see here. Yep. Yeah, as for the RAM, 8 gigs of G-Skill or Corsair 1866, cost you around
60, 70 bucks.
$70.
RAM prices have jumped up a lot. A few months ago, you could have picked this up for like 40 bucks, but there's been some shortages.
Yeah, it's true. RAM has definitely jumped up a lot. Let me go back to... Yeah, as for the video card, which is really important, I went with the Asus Radeon HD 7770. It's about, after rebate, about $105.
That's on Newegg, right?
Yeah, it's an entry-level gaming graphics card, and if you wanted to spend a little bit more money, you could probably go with a 7790 instead, which will get you about a 15 to 20% increase for another 45, 50 bucks.
Which again, if you're willing to spend it, is totally worth it.
For these purposes, this video card is pretty good for an entry-level gaming PC. Case is the Cooler Master Half 912. That's about
Standard.
50 bucks. It's a pretty standard case, but it has really good airflow. And as for the power supply, I usually like to go with a couple of different brands, but one of them is Corsair, and this is a TX650. It's about $70, and it's probably the best 650 watt power supply you're gonna buy for the money.
And he says TX, not CX. CX is a bit of an iffy power supply. They're okay.
All of the TX series, AX series, and HX series are manufactured by a company called Seasonic, and we'll get into that later. But those are the best power supplies on the market.
Yep. it gets a little confusing. We might actually go into a lot more detail with this later and kind of glance over it. It depends.
Basic.
Okay, Nikki, you have any questions about anything we mentioned?
Earlier you mentioned 2 video cards. What's the benefit of having two of the same video
Not
card on
2
one
of them. No, no, no. This is an upgraded video card.
No, he did actually say that. I did mention that the board can do Crossfire.
Ah.
So I think
So what is that? Explain that.
Crossfire is basically when you put 2 video cards instead of 1. The reason most people would do that is sometimes you'll spend less on 2 cards than you would on one better one. And then in the case where you might be wanting to upgrade your graphics, sometimes it's cheaper to add a second card rather than throw out your old card and put in a new one. And you'll get more performance.
It's really nice to have. On your
It's
motherboard.
utilizing the performance of both cards at once rather than just one card.
So it's like doubling the horsepower.
In a way.
Essentially, in a way, there are some limitations to it, and some games don't support it as well as they should, but most games nowadays do. With NVIDIA, it's called SLI. With AMD cards, it's called Crossfire, but it's the same thing.
Same concept. So is it? Could you do 2 different cards, or both have to be?
They
the
have
same?
to be the same card. They have to be the same GPU core.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is
Okay.
there is some exclusions where where 2 different branded cards will have the same GPU core, like for example,
Like an Asus and a Sapphire.
no, like an AMD has usually 2 brands, has 2 clock variants of the same card. Like it'll have a 7870 and a 7850. You can buy if you have a 7870 and a 7850. If you have basically they'll clock themselves down to the lowest common card. If that makes sense.
Essentially, like in the case of like a 7850 and a 7870, they're the exact same card with one of them having more shader models and a higher clock frequency. All that's going to happen is the other one is going to turn off all the things that don't exist in the lower end card. And
Which sometimes isn't worth it for the money that you spend. It kind of
that doesn't make sense to. It would always make sense to buy the higher end one.
And usually you want to buy the same type of card as the one you already have. There's a couple reasons for that. It's a little complicated, but basically you want the cards to be as similar as possible.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what's one of the better video card brands? GTX, AMD,
Well, GTXs are by NVIDIA,
NVIDIA.
and AMD makes the Radeon series. It all depends on what you're trying to spend. There's a lot of overlap between the 2 of them. Right now on the lower end, I'd go with AMD, but on the high end, NVIDIA makes some better cards. But it depends on the price point specifically.
Earlier, Alex was talking about a relatively cheap video card that can compare it to like a $700 card.
A $500 card.
A $500 card.
Well, basically, what I was talking about was the 760. NVIDIA just came out with the GTX 760.
It's basically this is finishing up their brand new 700 series line, which is the 2nd generation of their Kepler architecture.
Which was originated in the 600 series. So there's
Now, the 760 is really comparable. It's $250, and it's comparable to a card that last generation cost $400. Alex has that video card, as a matter of fact. It's the 670, the GTX 670. So the 760 is only $250, and gaming-wise, it does all of the same things, give or take maybe about 5 frames, 10 at most.
So we're looking at like a 3 to 5% performance jump in the cards.
Yeah, I mean, every game you could play with a 670, you can play with a 760, really just as smooth. And like I said, it's $250, so if you wanted to, you can buy 2 of those for $500 and crossfire them. I mean, I'm sorry, SLI them, whatever you call it. I mean, you'll be able to run everything at max, 1080p, multiple monitors, 120 hertz maybe, depending on what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we understand that. Now, what about these new Intel CPUs?
Yeah, Intel recently announced the Haswell CPUs. I think Alex probably knows a little bit more about that than I do.
I mean, from what I saw in the benchmarks and from what I've seen from actual users, I'm on the Ivy Bridge platform, which is the CPU generation before that. It's like maybe in some cases it's a 10% increase. In other cases it's more like a very marginal, like 3 to 5% increase. And I mean, a lot of people were saying that they're going to drop the current series that I have to get this new one. and that kind of seems like a waste of money. But if you don't have a system right now, it's kind of like the improvements that they made were more in the integrated graphics, which if you're gaming, you're gonna have a dedicated card anyways, so it doesn't really do too much. There's like some stuff here and there where there's like Intel QuickSync and maybe streaming or recording programs, which is nice, but it's not a big deal.
I mean, I game pretty hard, and I've got a GTX 680, but in my build, I have my CPU is 2 generations old. I have a Sandy Bridge E CPU. I have the Core i7-3820 with an X79 board. I have no.
A lot of numbers you just threw out there.
Yeah, I did, but I have no intention of upgrading my CPU from the one I have now anytime soon. Probably. I know they're coming out with the replacement to my CPU. The leak is for apparently September, and it doesn't even like nothing really seems that interesting that I would want to spend another $300-400 on a new CPU.
Okay.
So I think for most people, if you're gaming and you've got a Sandy Bridge or an Ivy Bridge CPU, there's really no need to be looking to upgrade unless maybe you've got an i5 and maybe you want an i7.
Or if you're one of those people that
extra.
bought an i3, I feel sorry for you.
Yeah, but I mean, if you have an i7 as it is right now, there's nothing you're gonna buy today that's really gonna give you much of a performance increase in gaming. Because an i7, you know, you can do all the streaming you want to do, you can play any game you want to play. It makes more sense to spend your money on upgrading your graphics card than it does to spend money on a new CPU and motherboard if you've already got, you know,
If you've already got a capable CPU.
Yeah, getting a 15% increase in, you know, in raw CPU calculations really doesn't make any sense if if what you're primarily doing is gaming. It doesn't make sense to drop $300 on a CPU.
I mean,
$200 on a motherboard.
and very specifically in gaming performance, it was like a 3 to 4% increase, if anything. And so it's like,
Right,
why would you want to do that?
Yeah, it's not a big enough increase for the payoff.
Yeah, because if you want to get an i7 and a decent motherboard, you're looking in the range of like $550 to $600.
I mean, in reality,
That's a lot of money to drop.
If you've already got, say, a 2600K or even a 3770K i7, and you've got a decent motherboard backing that thing up, you can throw on a CPU cooler like the Fantex one I have that I like so much is the TCP14, I think it's called. I'll throw up a link to that just to be sure. And that cooler is like $70, $80 you'll find it for, and you can overclock any chip to 4.5 gigahertz or above without a problem on air. You're gonna be able to play any game, power any graphics card, no problem.
Okay, and as long as you guys been talking about video cards and CPUs, you've mentioned overclocking. Could you properly explain what that is exactly?
Overclocking is when you adjust the voltage and core frequency of the CPU
Or the GPU.
Or the GPU, yeah, but specifically about CPUs, adjusting it above what it comes with stock from the manufacturer. So, you know, like for instance, my CPU is 3.8 gigahertz stock, and I've overclocked it to 4.7 gigahertz before. Right now I'm running stock because around the summertime I usually like to run stock when I'm not using the computer that much.
Okay, for a dumbass, what is that exactly?
What is overclocking? It's getting
Yes.
more performance out of your chip. That's
It's kind of like
So-
it's kind of like tweaking your engine to get more horsepower out. That's really
yeah. It's you know, if in terms of a car you might add an intake or something like that.
it's like that.
to get 15
It's like-
more horsepower.
It's
like
like
that.
it's like souping up your
Yeah, and you buy the
CPU.
cooler to make sure that the temps don't fry the CPU. That's really what
Yeah,
that's
you
for.
don't want it to get too hot.
Yeah, but when you overclock, you have to be
It's not
aware of. You have to make sure you have the components that can do it. It's not just about the CPU. You got to make sure you have a good cooler that can cool it. You got to make sure your motherboard's capable of overclocking, and overclocking well.
Which, by the way, if you
And-
guys have any questions about overclocking, please message us with your system specs, and we will definitely try to help you out.
And you also want to make sure your RAM is good, overclocking friendly RAM.
Well, you
that's
also
why-
forgot about the power supply. The power supply is a pretty big one.
Well, that was the last one I was going to mention. And you want to make sure your power supply can handle the additional wattage by overclocking your CPU. You'd be surprised how many watts you're going to add to your power draw just by upping your CPU a few hundred megahertz. That's going to change, you know, a CPU that maybe draws a minimum of 125 watts to drawing a minimum of like 145 watts.
Do you think you can give us a good example of that, Donnie? of the overclocking using proper RAM with proper RAM and proper
Well, most
power
of the
supply.
stuff that we're going to recommend you on the higher end builds is going to do that well. I think even the
Okay.
$600 build is
Oh,
going to be
okay.
able to handle overclocking just fine, right?
Okay.
If
do you
you're
guys wanna
if
go
you're
over-
not too aggressive with it, you should. On that build
Okay.
you showed, Donnie, would 4 gigahertz be out of the question on that system?
No, if as long as you add a decent cooler with that chip, I would add a Cooler Master Hyper 212. That's around $25 for that
Yeah,
thing.
I mean,
And
there might be better coolers for 30-40 bucks, but I mean, at that price, that's probably the best cooler you could buy.
the difference is
Minimal.
meager and it's not worth the extra money. And I wouldn't put any more powerful CPU cooler on a chip that's that cheap, because then you may as well have just bought a better chip for the money.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't try to go as aggressive as I did with my overclock, because I got about 4.4 out of mine, out of my old 6-core, but that wasn't the 6300, the 6100. You could probably get about the same by pushing it to 4 gigahertz. 4 gigahertz should probably be a number you guys should go for. If you guys want any help with overclocking, again, message us, and we could kind of walk you through it.
Yeah.
Okay. Did we go over the $600 build yet?
That was
Yeah,
it.
we did. Well,
Yeah.
we haven't gone over the $8 and $1,200 builds, and I think Alex can handle the 8.
Yeah, I can go over the 8 right now.
Yeah. Let's go over those other two builds.
Okay. Now, right now, for what did you find it for? About 145 bucks on Amazon. You can get an AMD FX 8320. Now, the first number in their CPUs in the FX series counts the cores. So this is an 8-core at 3.5 gigahertz. You have the Fantex cooler, which you mentioned. Again, it's about $70. You have a Gigabyte GA 990 FXA UD3, which is one of the best motherboards you could get for under $150 on AMD's side. I personally used it, and I overclocked the shit out of everything that I used.
I've got a few friends that use that motherboard, and they've all had good experiences with it.
I mean, it has full Crossfire and SLI at X16. I think the other board had X8, Donnie.
Yeah, it's
Which basically means it's not going to get the full potential of the Crossfire, but it's still a nice idea to have that X8.
that's the PCI lanes is what you're counting. X16 means you're using full speed of the graphics card, a full 16 lanes on each card. So you're getting the maximum performance you could.
That's something that's really complicated, and we'll get into it another time. But basically, the more PCI lanes, the better it is to go for the Crossfire.
Okay, and give us an example on those two builds you just explained, the 6 and 8. What's the most powerful thing that it's going to run? Like, what's the best?
On the $600 build, I mean, that was a 7770, Donnie?
Yeah, the $600 bill is a 7770. I believe the other one is 7870.
Yep. Basically, you could probably run Battlefield on...
Battlefield 3.
Battlefield 3 on medium with that system and get decent frames. With this, you should be able to do high and possibly push max. And the way that it's set up there, you can easily overclock that to 4 gigahertz, maybe 4.2.
And on the $600 build, you can pretty much run.
You can run every game
any
that's out there.
any normal game, at least on low or medium.
I mean, basically, that system's going to be really comparable to a new console in graphics power.
I'll give it a comparison. I've put together one of those systems not too long ago. That particular system with that video card and that processor, I was able to run BioShock Infinite on high at 1080p.
Okay.
So if I was to want to build a gaming PC, I would want to play everything at least on medium. At least on medium to low. I would want to play everything.
The main differences between the PCs and the consoles is, first of all, PCs can run at 1080p. Even the next-gen consoles are going to have some issues on certain games at 1080p. For instance, Battlefield 4 is going to run at 720p on the next-generation consoles. DICE has already said this. The reason why, they've got a lot of different effects going on that the graphics cards and the processors, more importantly, the processors and those things, can't handle that many effects at that high of a resolution, so they have to scale it down. With that $600 build, you are going to be able to handle those effects at 1080p. You might have to turn down things like anti-aliasing, though.
Okay, now you went over 6 and go over 12, the $1,200 build.
Well, I mean,
12.
I don't know if we're done with the $600 bill because I actually didn't finish.
No.
We're going to yeah, basically the same RAM, except no, this is the same RAM. As mentioned before, and we have an 850 watt XFX 80 plus bronze power supply. XFX is also one of those power supplies that we like to recommend, which we'll get into later. But this is an 850 watt. It is powerful enough to handle 2 of those video cards that we mentioned, and and definitely 2 of those 760s. You know, Donnie, you'd say that would handle 2 760s, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. That power supply is actually identical to the one I have, except I have the Corsair model. I have a Corsair 850, and I've got a 680, and I know with certainty I can power a second one if I wanted to. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with this thing, if you wanted to do some upgrades to it, it comes up to like $830. If you did want to put a bit more money into it, you could put one of those 760s in there instead of this XFX 7870. The 760 would give you a decent amount of performance for another $50.
Yeah.
So if you do have the $50 to spend, or you're just not interested in overclocking your CPU right away, and popping that CPU cooler on, you could forego the CPU cooler and hit that nice 760.
Let me just say most importantly, the main differences between that $600 build and this $800 build, aside from gaming, is if you plan on streaming your games to like something like Twitch.tv, that $800 build is going to do that a lot better. Not only because it has better graphics performance, but it also has 2 extra cores. And the more processing cores you have, the better for things like gaming while streaming, especially you're streaming.
Okay, now what would you say would be the biggest differences between the 6 and the 800?
That's the biggest difference.
And you're going to be able to play your games at higher settings. I mean, you could probably do high and ultra on most games with this setup. Would that be fair to say, Donnie? High and ultra?
Yeah. The $800 build will play a game like BioShock Infinite on probably max.
So there you go. Again, if you want to get a little bit more performance out of it too, you could switch out the video card for and probably an EVGA GTX 760.
Yeah.
And there's also some money you might want to put into a slightly different case if that's necessary to you. We'll go into that later though.
Yeah, going into the higher end build, the $1,200 build that I set up today is an Intel Core i7 3770K. That's actually an Ivy Bridge chip. The reason why I recommend Ivy Bridge over Haswell is because it's cheaper.
The motherboards are a bit cheaper too, which is nice.
The motherboards are cheaper, and you're not losing much gaming performance or performance in general. The only thing you're really losing is the integrated graphics performance. That's the major difference between those 2 chips. And it's hard to me to recommend somebody who's building a gaming PC to go Haswell right now because they're so much more expensive than Ivy Bridge, and there's not a big gain. So yeah, the 3770K, the Fantex PHTC 14PE, cooler, which is the same cooler I've been recommending in pretty much anything today. The ASRock Z77 Extreme 6. That's about $155. It's a good motherboard that can do Crossfire. Corsair Vengeance, 8 gigs of RAM. I mean, if you can find G-Skill or a comparable major brand for a bit cheaper, but this RAM is 1866, so it's quite fast. Western Digital Caviar Black, same hard drive that's in every build today. It's a good hard drive.
Yep.
And the GeForce GTX 760. This is a 2 gig card. It's $250, and it's probably the best price to performance ratio card on the market today. And it's hard not to recommend this card because it'll play any game you want on max settings. Maybe certain games you might have to scale back a little bit, but it's a really good card. And with this build, you probably have the room to add a second one in the future if you want to be able to do triple monitors, or maybe you want a nice 120 hertz display. This will be able to handle those things. The case is a Cooler Master Half XM, which is Alex here has that case, and he He loves it. It's got huge amounts of space in it. Great for if you're doing overclocking, if you have a lot of hard drives, if you want to add a second video card, it's got plenty of space for that.
I personally have 4 hard drives I'm using right now, and an SSD. So, and there's still room for more. So
yeah, and the power supply is once again the XFX 850 watt. The reason why I recommend this one so much is because it's $95 right now. I have a comparable power supply that I spent about $140 on, and it's not any better. So.
Okay. Do you want?
Do you have any questions about that build that we just mentioned, Nikki?
Could I run Diablo 2 on high on it?
No.
No. Only if you run it at 800 by 600, if it even has that resolution.
No, I mean, see, this has probably CPU performance is better on this side, but not hugely better than the $800 rig. But what's most important here is the graphics performance and the upgradability. The $800 rig is plenty upgradable. You can easily add a second video card and get lots of performance. But if you added a second one of these cards for not much more,
of what card? The GeForce card?
Yeah, the GeForce 760. It's a hugely different game. I would go as far as to say 2 of those cards, which cost $500, can compare to the performance of a GTX 690, and those are
$1,000.
$1,000. Yeah.
If you can find
you
them.
mentioned you was talking about RAM speed.
Mm-hmm.
You was talking about
RAM speed is when I talk about like the numbers like DDR3 1866 1600. RAM speed is important. It's probably more important for AMD CPUs than it is for Intel's, just because of the way the memory controller works. But RAM speed, the higher the frequency, the better it is for, first of all, overclocking your processor, and second of all, for memory operations. So
gaming, when you load stuff into the game, it is memory operations. So having a bit of higher clocked memory is nice to have.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to get too technical on that. Okay. All of the rigs we talked about today all have 8 gigs of RAM, and the reason why is because for gaming, that's the number I aim for. If you are doing something other than gaming, that's maybe a little bit more RAM heavy, you might want to upgrade your RAM to 16 gigs. If you're doing HD video editing or something, I personally have 16 gigs, but I do a lot of web development and stuff like that on my computer, not just gaming. But if you're just gaming, 8 gigs of RAM is plenty.
I have 8, and I've never run into issues while
the
just
minimum,
gaming.
The minimum is 4, but at this point, unless you're really, really on a tight budget, I wouldn't get 4 gigs of RAM.
Okay, 4 gigs. Could I say if I don't have enough for the 8? Well, if I want to put 6 or 7.
Don't do that. And
There's
the reason
a reason
why is
for
because
that.
There's a number of reasons, but the main reason why is you want multiples in the power of 2, because RAM is going to be on all of these configurations dual channel.
Which means the really simplest way to explain that is it's like a highway, and the way that the memory moves is dual channel, as in, you know, there's 2 lanes. If you put 3 sticks of RAM in, then it becomes 1 lane out and in.
Exactly.
So that's going to really slow down your system.
It has to be an even number. You wanna be occupying at least 2 or all 4 of your memory slots with even amounts of RAM.
With all of the configurations we've mentioned today, there is other systems and older systems that have different configurations, but we're not going to get into that.
Okay. Now somebody who might have, had a PC in the past and tried to do gaming on it, they might have looked at the video card and was seen Intel Graphics 3000, or look at one card and it might be GTX 420 or 670 or whatever. What's the difference between the numbers?
Yeah, well, that's actually a good question. People always get confused with the model numbers. I've seen a lot of people, they had a Radeon HD 4870 from a few generations ago, and they upgraded to, or quote-unquote upgraded to, a Radeon HD 5450 because they assumed that 5000 is better than 4000. Well, that should be true. It's not, because the 4 and the 5 in those numbers is the series number. So
The first
if you're
number
getting
is the series number.
yeah, the first number is the series number, so that's the generation. The second number is the specific model number. So you want the highest in that regard. So if you were buying, if you say in my case I have a GTX 680, I shouldn't upgrade to a GTX 760 just because it's a 7. I'd want to upgrade to a 780 or above.
So the first number is the generation, and
Then
then
the
the
second number
following
is the-
numbers are, let's say, the power.
Yeah, it would be the model number, and the higher the model number,
model number.
it would be the more powerful.
The
Yeah.
higher, so the higher number, the higher last numbers, say 2 or 3 numbers, are the model number.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, okay. With AMD, like right now, they're at the 7000 series. So there's there is the 7700 series, the 7800 series, the 7900 series, and in those series there is the 7950, the 7970, and the 7990, and then there's the 7850, the 7870, and the 7890. No, there's not a 7890. Sorry. Then there's this. This gets really redundant.
This is a little
Um,
ridiculous, yeah. But I think you guys kind of follow the idea. If you do have any
But
questions, you can please.
It's a common mistake.
It's a
The
very
higher
common
number
mistake.
is better. Yes.
Yeah, it's just the bottom line is if the series number isn't higher than the one you have, then it's not an upgrade. It couldn't possibly be. It depends on how old your card is, though.
Because if you have, say, a GTX 280, I mean, anything that just came out in this 7000 series is going to kick the shit out of what you have.
And what if I have an AMD Sapphire 1850?
A Sapphire 1850.
Oh my
Everything you
God.
buy today is better than that.
I'm gonna tell you what. Wasn't that what was basically no, the 1300 series what was in the Xbox, wasn't it?
No.
I don't remember.
No. What, the 360, you mean?
Yeah.
No, no.
Yeah, no, the Xbox 360 is actually an AMD Radeon HD 1850.
All right. I had one of those on a really old laptop.
Yeah.
I had one. I used to play SWTOR.
So you had an X1850 in a laptop?
I'm talking years ago. Maybe 5-6 years ago.
That's like a $2,000 laptop when it came out.
Yeah, it was. It was like a $2,600 gateway laptop. It was top of the line at that time.
Like I'm saying is my point is your graphics card was up there with the one that's in the Xbox 360 today.
Right.
One
So
in that
I'm talking about 5-6 years ago. So
That would fit. That would fit.
right. Okay. So CPU to price performance. CPU price to performance ratio.
Yeah, when you buy a CPU, you definitely want to get the most performance out of the price you pay. So it doesn't make sense to buy something that's okay. I'll just say it this way. Right now, you can buy a Core i3 for about $135, and that's a dual-core CPU that can't be overclocked, and it is a wonderful, efficient CPU. For gaming, it's a piece of crap.
And no one
don't
should
buy
buy
it.
it. No one should buy it.
It's-
I don't care
it's
what
really-
everybody
it's-
on forums tell you. The i3 is
it's-
not a gaming CPU.
It's really good for Craigslist though.
It's fantastic if you're browsing Craigslist or sending emails, yeah.
Yes.
But if you're building a gaming rig, like I said, the minimum CPU I would shoot for is probably the FX 6300. It's $120. If you go to Micro Center, you can get a free motherboard with it.
Shout out to Micro Center. Word up.
That's always. By the way, no matter what we show you today, always check Micro Center and compare, because their in-store deals are really good, especially for AMD bundles, and you'll get a really good deal on a lot of what you're looking to buy. Either you'll get a free motherboard, or you might get $40 off on a better motherboard. It all depends, but you should check them out if you have a Micro Center in your area.
Okay.
And no, they're not sponsoring us.
Okay, let's go back.
I wish
to
they were.
prices. Let's say I'm a cheap bastard. I'm poor. I can't afford batteries for my Xbox. I throw away my Xbox, and somehow I save $600 and I build one of these PCs. What do I do about games?
Well, I mean, the good news is when you buy games on the PC, they're cheaper than they are on the console.
Are they?
For the most part, yes. Steam has sales on games every single day. a lot of games launch on the PC cheaper than they do on the console. For instance, Deadpool is launching at $40. And you know that usually a game that launches at $60 on the console will launch at 50 on the PC. There's rare occasions where it still launches at 60, but then within the same week, the prices go down. I have seen games that were 2 weeks old on sale.
Hitman Absolution was like $20 for Christmas. Just throwing
and that
that
was a month after it came out. All right, what else do we need to cover?
I think we've pretty much covered.
Well, we
everything.
didn't.
Wait,
we didn't actually cover the power supply breakdown. We never actually got it, and why 6 cores may be necessary.
And we didn't cover BigSausagePizza.com.
We do not endorse or support BigSausagePieces.com.
Alright, well, you know, I'll just get right into it. I get a lot of questions from people, and you know, there's a general misconception with people who don't really know much about computers and gaming computers that, you know, if they're going to get a gaming computer, they don't need something with 6 cores or more. A lot of people don't even think you need quad cores to game. That's not true. I don't know. There's a lot of misinformation on the internet.
And there's a lot of older games that only use 2 cores. A lot of older games.
There are plenty of people who still go by the old, you know, guard of things that, games don't use more than 2 cores. That's not true anymore. That stopped happening a couple of years ago.
And people will look at how many games still use only 2 cores, and then I'll go, all of the games you mentioned are 5 to 6 years old.
Yeah. Every game that comes out today, especially if it's DirectX 11, is using at least a quad core. Plenty of them are using more. In games like Crysis 3 and Battlefield 3, they can use 6 cores,
8.
depending on and even 8, depending on your configuration. They will use those processing threads if you have them. And it's not only that. Do you want to just game, or do you want to be able to game and maybe do something in the background? Maybe you're in a Skype call. Perhaps you're streaming a video of your game. More cores are good for those things.
I can tell you personally, I have an i5, and everyone said that the i5 is all you need for gaming. And frankly, I wanted to get an i7, but I couldn't afford it, and there was also a Micro Center deal that bundled with that. I can tell you personally that while playing some of the newer games, like I cannot stream and play Battlefield. I cannot really record well at max on BioShock up until there was a couple of updates. Tomb Raider could not be streamed and played at a proper, on max, even though I had the power to do it, even though I had the graphics power to do it without a problem.
Okay, so you can't stream and play Battlefield 3
I'll just compare this. The main difference between my computer and Alex's computer is he has an i5, I have an i7. My i7, the difference between an i7 and i5 is i7s have hyper-threading. What that means is my CPU might be a quad core, but it operates like an 8 core because it has 8 threads instead of 4. So that means when he plays a game that uses 4 threads and he has none to spare, I can play that same game and have 4 more threads to spare to put towards an operation like streaming video. So I can play Tomb Raider and still stream it. And he has issues with that.
Okay. So
Crysis 3 is actually a really good example of this. I had to close all of my background programs before I went to play Crysis 3. Why?
Okay.
Because of how system intensive it was. And I am supposed to have the best gaming the best gaming CPU that's out there at that time.
Okay, Donnie, you can stream and play Tomb Raider on your PC. Let's talk about your PC. What are your specs and what's your rig consist of, and how much did you spend on it?
Well,
He spent a lot.
Let's see.
I've got let's see, an ASRock X79 motherboard, Core i7 3820, NVIDIA GTX 680, 16 gigs of Corsair Vengeance 1600, a Western Digital Caviar black hard drive, a Samsung 840 250 gig SSD, a couple of 500 gig hard drives, and a Fantex TCP 14 cooler. My rig without including my monitor and stuff like that is about 1600.
Okay. So it's safe to say you can run Diablo 2.
On medium.
It's safe
Medium.
to say I could.
Okay. And what do you
But
run
I
at?
can't run. I can't run SWTOR though. I mean, I can run every game that I've ever played on Ultra and get about 60 FPS.
And what do you run at? How many gigahertz?
Right now, my CPU's at stock at the 3.8 gigahertz.
And at its highest?
He hit
At its highest,
4.7.
3.7.
4.7?
Yeah.
Alex, your turn.
I have a Core i5, which is not as good as his CPU, and as we just discussed. I'm actually currently at 4 gigahertz, even though the stock is 3.6. Simply because this asshole was just beating me in every game because of his core frequency. It kind of got me irritated.
Well, hold on a second. When he says beating, he doesn't mean like skill-wise.
No. I mean like
Having a better
frames.
CPU does not make you better at the game.
Oh, it'll help you not get bogged down by having a bad computer. Trying to run one of those systems that we mentioned, like playing Battlefield, say multiplayer on max, you will not have a pleasurable experience. Although you can run the game on max, the whole key with PC gaming is you want to try to hit 60 frames. Anyways, I have 8 gigs of G-Skill RAM at 1333 because it's just RAM I have. I was going to I was doing a build for somebody. They said they wanted Corsair and the RAM that I had, and I just gave them the RAM that I had because I'm a cheap ass. I mean, I have a Samsung 830 SSD at what 250 gigs,
Yeah, 256, I think.
something like that.
or-
I have this. I have a Caviar Black 1 terabyte hard drive, a couple of storage drives. I have one that's 2 terabyte and one that's like 650, 640. They're all those are Western Digital. And I have a GTX 670 for the win, which is basically his graphics card, in gaming performance wise.
Yeah.
And my overall cost without monitor, keyboard, and mouse, like $1,000, maybe $1,100 with the extra hard drives thrown in.
Okay. Well, guess
I
what?
bought everything cheap. I'm cheap.
On my Dell Inspiron laptop, I got an i3 processor. I run at 2.89 gigahertz.
Whoa.
Yeah. I got
Decibel.
four gigs of RAM. Oh yeah. And I got Dell Integrated HD 3000. Oh yeah.
Oh, watch out with that Intel Integrated HD 3000.
Oh yeah. It's awesome. Okay, let's do a comparison of some games that run on the Xbox and that the game that can run on PC. What are the differences from Battlefield 3 on your PC?
That's a perfect
and
game.
Battlefield 3 on the 360.
God bless you for saying that one, because you just made our point so much better. If you would have said Call of Duty, we'd be like,
The difference. All right, I'll just put it this way: Battlefield 3 on the Xbox 360 is below 720p. It doesn't have anywhere near the amount of particle effects that it does on the PC.
And,
Particle
how
effects are when
doesn't
something
have-
blows up, the dust, the wind, the
It
dirt,
doesn't
the
have
debris.
How many frames on 360?
30.
30.
On PC. On PC.
As good as your system is, we get 60.
I get an average of 60, but I've gotten about 120 before.
Yeah, it's
Alright.
nice.
Um,
Now, mind you, you can only see 60 on your average monitor.
right, unless you have 120 hertz display that can show a refresh rate of 60 FPS, but I mean of 120 FPS. The biggest difference between Battlefield on the PC and console, though, the amount of players.
24 to
It's
64.
It's 64 players on the PC and only 24 on.
Right,
console.
24, yeah, 60. See, I didn't know that.
Well, there's
I
a
didn't know
whole
that was
different
64.
thing where Conquest is you know, we have small Conquest where it's like 3 flag Conquest instead of 5.
Yeah.
That's what it is on console. I just found this out about a few weeks ago.
So you mean it's really scaled down?
Yeah. Yeah.
Map size and
Uh-huh.
everything. They give you sections of the map instead of.
It makes me feel good about myself. It's like,
You know,
yeah, this game is
funny-
epic.
Funny little story. I was at the GameStop the other day. I barely go to GameStop.
PC gamer.
They're gay.
So I go to GameStop with my brother, and the talk of Battlefield 4 comes up, and the woman that's working there, she mentions that she pre-ordered it. So I was like, first question, PC or console? And she looks at me and she looks down and she says, unfortunately, console. And I said, really? I mean, isn't that like owning a Ferrari and only going like 25 miles an hour? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, well, since you play on console, I guess we can't be friends.
Well, I mean, the thing I have to mention is the fact that she knew as a console player how different it is just goes to show you how prevalent
The fact that she knew that she was getting an inferior experience. Don't get me wrong, most games, I mean, they look better on PC, but they don't really play any different.
I mean,
right?
there's a lot of games that I played like Devil May Cry and Remember Me, which are just they look kind of better, and that's really it.
Okay, let's say.
I mean, like Call of Duty looks better on PC, but it plays exactly the same, except for the fact that when I play Call of Duty on my PC, I get about 300 frames per second.
I was getting like 148 literally with the game on max with everything up.
I was hitting frame limiter at like 200 frames per second. Yeah.
I was giggling because, and also the people on the Steam free weekend were just not good.
Well, the free weekend it still plays with everybody
Yeah.
on PC, and yeah, everyone was bad. I'm not. But
Okay.
that's
Maybe
another
that's just because
conversation.
we're good at. Maybe it's just because we play Battlefield and I try to be good at it. I don't know. But then
Okay,
again, this is the
let's
Be
say-
a Real Gamer podcast. Suck it, noobs.
Okay, let's say I'm jumping from console to PC. Okay, I dropped my console. No more 360. No more PlayStation. Fuck you, Sony.
We love you.
And I'm going to my PC, and I'm like, mouse and keyboard. What is this?
Well,
What is this?
fortunately,
well-
you can use a controller. It is not recommended for a lot of games that are competitive PC shooters, like Battlefield, and
The best
something like
example I can
StarCraft.
give-
If you want to try
the
to
best
play a game
example-
like StarCraft or World of Warcraft on a controller, good luck to you.
The best example I can give is for me I have two different. It depends on what game I'm playing. If I'm playing, all right, I have two categories. I have a lean back game or a competitive game. Battlefield 3 is a competitive game I play with a mouse and keyboard. If I'm playing Tomb Raider Tomb Raider in general, that's a lean back game. I'll plug in my 360 controller, and I'll play it with that.
So wait. I can plug in my 360 controller to my PC and play.
Yep.
If you've got a USB one, you can plug it right in. If you have a wireless one, you can get a wireless USB adapter for like $12 on eBay. I have one of those.
Okay.
Or you could also go ahead, if you're a big Sony fanboy, you can get the adapters for those. But, I mean...
Well, yeah, but see, when you do that, every game that supports controllers nowadays uses X input, and X input is Microsoft's input technology, which uses the 360 controller.
Because Windows and
it works best
Microsoft...
with that.
Windows and
Right, because-
Microsoft is the same thing. So Xbox and
So
Microsoft,
the-
same company.
The controller was kind of designed around Windows.
Windows was supported. No, Windows gave support to the controller. Basically, the guys who work with Windows kind of added controller support and did it really well.
It made sense.
Yeah.
And people think it's amazing, but when I think about it, it's just I had gaming pads before they came up with the X input back when it was direct
They
input,
were not good.
and they were crap. And now that they have X input, everything is just smooth and flawless, and it works
It's
just like you
wonderful.
expect it to on a console.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, it really does. I have one of those little wireless receivers. I was playing on Dishonored with it. It worked perfectly.
Oh, so you mean that
Um,
you just lied to the viewers? Is that what you
He
just
was
did?
playing.
What?
He was playing.
No,
He was
don't
like-
do that.
I just bought it just now in the podcast.
By
Edit
the
that
way,
out. Edit that
by the
out.
way, I just have to say, I appreciate that you like Dishonored because I couldn't stand it.
Ah.
No, I played like one level. I mean, it's okay. I haven't finished it. I'm nowhere near. It's just whatever.
I think this video is about 45 minutes too long.
So it's supposed to be 4 minutes long? Yeah, I mean, you know what? I think let's just really cut through the power supply thing really quickly. Seasonic is the Rolls-Royce of power supplies. They make power supplies and subcontract the power supplies to brands like Corsair, XFX, and a couple of other brands that I can't remember off the top of my head. But they're generally a lot of high-end power supply companies get work from Seasonic, and the prices on them are usually pretty comparable.
Just in general, when you're buying a power supply, I kind of like to at least spend 10% of my build on a power supply.
And in the case you
if
want
I'm
to spend about
spending-
10% too.
Yeah, if I'm spending, $600, I should be spending $60 on my power supply. If I'm
Okay.
spending
At a
$400,
minimum.
I should be
At a
spending
minimum.
$120.
If you want to
know,
spend
this-
more, I can't really get mad at somebody for overspending on a power supply because a good power
Yeah.
supply is
But it
something that's
just-
going to save lots of
you-
I
money.
hate when
would-
somebody has a
would-
$600 build and they buy a $35 power supply and they wonder why they can't upgrade.
So you would say to have a good power supply would be critical to any build?
See, the power supply is one of the most important parts.
If you plan on being a gamer for a long time, if you're one of those guys that's like, I want to play Diablo 3 and just Diablo 3 because I played Diablo 2, you know, getting what you need for now is fine. But
I mean,
most people aren't like that.
When you think about it this way, the power supply powers everything in your computer, and it'll power everything you want to put in your computer from any type of upgrades. So you want to make sure that it's capable of upgrading. It's capable of outliving the rest of your system.
I mean, me and Donnie's in a position where we might upgrade 3 times and keep the same power supply.
I know. I would upgrade. I would keep. I can add a second video card. I can upgrade my CPU, and I don't have to touch the power supply. I don't. A good idea is to buy a power supply that you can put in your system and just not think about it for a long time.
If I wanted to play Metal Gear 5 Phantom Pain. Okay, I want to play that when it comes out.
On the PC?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Say I want to play it on PC when it comes out. Is my $1,200 build going to be able to run it?
Your $1,200 build will definitely be able to run it.
It'll run it way better than a console.
I'm going to be honest with you. The Phantom Pain, I don't know how much development time they're going to put into the PC version. If it's a straight up console port, it'll run beautifully even on the $600 rig. If they decide to really take some time on it, then you might need the higher end rigs. But I know the $800 rig and the $1,200 rig that we recommended will kill that game regardless.
But basically, if you buy the $600 rig, everything that you want to play in a console, you can play slightly better on this gaming PC. Now, that being said, they can do tricks behind the scenes, the developers, to make the game look a little bit different. You know, they might lower some of the textures in the game, or they might just run the game at a lower resolution than they actually sell it to you. So you're going to be wondering why you can't run your game at, 1080p on max where the console can run it. There's a reason for that.
Okay, that's another topic. About is there any other special features that I might get if I was to play a game on PC that if I played it on console?
Well, that's
modding is always there.
Yeah, I mean, you could obviously in certain games you can mod the game. Secondly, I mean, free multiplayer, that's always one. Unless you're a Sony person, then it's for free anyway usually.
In certain cases, there's like MMOs and stuff where it's pay to play. But
as far as features go, I mean, I guess the big features are, one, being able to record your games without any extra hardware, being able to stream your games. The consoles in the next generation are just now getting up to the PC standards where you can stream the games and record them. And for the competitive community, being able to stream and record your games are very important because they want to be able to make montages. They want to be able to,
live cast their games
let's play.
Let's play.
And with a console as of right now, you need to go ahead and buy $100 to $200 game DVR system thing. With a PC, you don't need to do that. It's all there.
So you're saying if I already do that on my 360 or my PlayStation, I can just buy a PC and do it instantly?
Absolutely. It's all software from that point. The hardware is all there.
You just got to find the applications that you fine tune to use. There's a bunch of them that you could use.
For streaming, I like to use OBS.
Agreed.
And big shout out to them because they're an open project.
Is there any way I can get a link to OBS if I was to do that on my PC?
Absolutely. I will add a link to the description for anybody who's interested in streaming and doing it without having to buy a proprietary application. OBS is a really great community developed application that is completely free and open source, and big ups to the developers.
Yes, we don't like to pay. We like free. Free is free.
We like open source.
We like open source because there's better development for it too. I mean, say what you want about XSplit, and there's some people who still swear by it. I can't use it. I prefer OBS with like a.
Okay, let's talk about PC mods. If I was to get Grand Theft Auto on Xbox, I can't do mods. What kind of mods could I do for PC?
I can personally tell you that because I've just done it. There's the Iron Man mod where you can play as Iron Man and fly around the map. I actually haven't done that one. There's a bunch of car mods that you could do, where you could add actual cars. Adding too many of them might cause instability in the game, but there's ways around that. And you kind of pick and choose the cars you want.
Another good example of mods is NBA 2K13 is a game I love to play, and I usually play with my brothers and my cousin and whatnot. And I play it on my PC rather than console, and because I have it on the PC, I downloaded this mod that allows us to play as DC and Marvel superheroes and villains. You can play Marvel versus DC, and I'm playing as the Incredible Hulk dunking. There's nothing more fun than dunking on somebody with the Incredible Hulk, or you know, shooting a 3 with Iron Man. Sorry, that's just fun.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you could do that's like that in GTA 2. I've actually added some of the Battlefield 3 characters, some of the characters in the game as gangs. It's pretty hilarious. I've actually made my main character Nico turn into Shepard. And I've what was the last thing I did? Oh, I added the Batmobile into the game. I actually added the Batmobile. Can you do that anywhere else?
What if I really like Skyrim? And
Oh my, that is the most moddable game in the
Skyrim.
world.
What kind of mods do I do for Skyrim?
It's
graphics mods,
story
texture
mods,
story mods, gameplay mods. I mean,
there's
everything
full
you can think
overhaul
of,
mods in
they've done
games
it.
that you can have a completely different game. I mean, Grand Theft, I just found out this one. There's a Grand Theft Auto mod where you can be a cop, and there's another one where you're actually out in the desert, and there's all these specific cop missions.
There is a mod for Grand Theft Auto 4 that is a full conversion that turns the game into GTA San Andreas, and one that I think they haven't released, but they were working on that makes the game Vice City, but with updated graphics. Obviously.
I mean, Skyrim, there's a whole bunch of fixes for it too, where they make the combat system better. They make.
There's also a mod for Skyrim where
you can become Goku.
No.
That one's great.
Where you can play as My Little Pony characters. That's interesting.
There's another mod actually.
I can see a lot of troll kids having fun with that.
I think the best mod though that's for that game
really
is there
fun.
is.
Look at the video on YouTube. It's fun.
There is a mod where you can have basically the Galactic Civil War break out in there. Where I'm sorry, the Clone Wars break out, where you have Jedis and Sith fighting each other in the streets.
I mean, I remember when I used to play Counter-Strike, we used to do mods ourselves, and like all of the different maps we played on our server had different, like it was a different character set, and it was different like maps. Like we had a Futurama map where you jump through the boxes to get into different rooms, and it was Bender versus Robot Devil, and another one where it was like The Simpsons, Homer versus Mr. Burns, Mario versus Luigi. Let's see, Alien versus Predator. And then we had one where you played in this like city on these rooftops, and you swung around, and it was Spider-Man versus Venom. Mind you, this is Counter-Strike. You're shooting each other, but you're shooting each other as Spider-Man and Venom. Web swinging. I mean, you just can't do that anymore.
Skyrim, Dead Star Moon, lightsabers.
That's it.
You can play as Cloud from Final Fantasy VII.
That's it.
My Little Pony.
Because everyone wants to play as Cloud from Final Fantasy VII.
Oh yes, everybody.
I mean, there's so much too in a lot of games, especially the Counter-Strike games, where you can find custom maps like crazy, and it's awesome.
Yeah, there's
custom
like
maps are great.
On multiplayer games, there's totally custom maps from mods that players have created.
It's honestly there's so much that you gain from moving to PC,
Okay,
and if you
like
guys can afford to move over instead of buying one of the new consoles, I would strongly recommend it.
Like if you've ever played Halo, and publishers release the fan-made maps sometimes. Like
those are great.
That's in like, would you say every multiplayer game?
Not every.
Not everyone.
Not everyone,
Lately,
but they're there.
I'll put it this way. Lately, because of DLC, a lot of publishers have kind of been moving away from releasing their SDKs so you can make custom maps. Battlefield, for instance, DICE has never released an SDK for it. I don't think they're going to.
Maybe they might now at this point for 3, since it's close to being done.
I hope so, because that'll breathe new life into 3. Even I'll still play 3 while we have 4, just so I can play mods.
There was a Call of Duty 4 mod that was basically similar to Star Wars Battlefront. It was a reskin and a whole redesign of the game.
Well, speaking of Star Wars Battlefront,
yes,
that game's coming out, so fuck you guys.
Awesome.
Oh yeah,
that'll be awesome.
Oh yeah,
Frostbite 3.
Oh yeah, Frostbite. I like how you're getting on the bandwagon. Frostbite 3.
Awesome.
That dice.
Frostbite 3. Because this guy hasn't even seen what Frostbite 3 is capable of.
Oh my
Frostbite
god.
2 is
I have no
capable
idea
of.
what it's capable of. I know it's sick though.
Yeah, Nikki, you should come over someday and see what Battlefield 3 looks like on Max and look at the cool shit that happens in that engine.
Yeah, you're welcome to come over to
Oh
my
my
house.
god.
Well, no, actually, you're not welcome to come over to my house.
This is Alex from Be a Real Gamer signing off.